Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today, and this is an introduction to the Betterment Project. Well, what's the Betterment Project? I'm glad you asked. It is intended to be a method of how we can all get along together. Rather than a method of saying, I'm right, you're wrong, so you better roll over and do what I tell you, because hey, I'm right. It is a method of discovering how our different ways of viewing the world can come together around a central theme of whatever it is that we can find that we have in common, whatever we can all agree on. So it's a collaborative process. We're all working together. We're not working against each other. We're not engaging in argument. We're engaging in discussion. These are the goals of the project. The big overall arching goal is to discover the methods and plans which maximize individual freedom and happiness while minimizing harm and offense. How are we going to do that? I know. That's where it gets complicated. So I'm sure this is coming off as, this guy thinks he's going to solve all the problems. Oh my, oh my. Well, I don't. I think I've discovered a method by which we all can come together, regardless of our point of view, and begin agreeing on certain things. And from those agreements, I believe we can begin building, if you will, a database of our common understanding of what it means to be human and how we can get along. The goal of the project, in a sense, is how do we get along, not how can I prove I'm right. So my plan right now is that we can begin to have conversations. I'll begin sharing the project, showing how it works, as well as making episodes that describe the conclusions I've come to through the project over time. And then we can start interacting. You can start telling me where you think I'm wrong, where you think I'm right. We can get other viewpoints, and we can start categorizing. Okay, these things are about who we are as humans, and these things are about who you are, and who he is, and who she is, and who they are. And as we build a way of commonly agreeing and associating with each other, we are able to do that because we can agree to only include in the commons what we can all agree on, or what, all I know, that's not, there will be things that most of us will not be able to agree with. So maybe I should talk a little bit about how we're all going to agree on something. So the commons is the idea that there are things that, believe it or not, we will all agree on. Humans generally have 2 legs and 2 arms. Humans get hurt. Humans feel pleasure and pain. Humans have values. I think we can build quite a comprehensive list of aspects of humanity together like that. That will create, I believe, a common ethic, if you will, a common way of treating each other, a common way of having common ground with other people. The Betterment Project is going to try to not tell people what is true and how they should behave, but allow everyone to build as a human race, as a whole, what is true. Of course, there's problems with that. There are people who will not agree no matter what. At least there appears to be. We get strong-headed. We are not going to come up with a consistent consensus. I'd like to believe we will. Not sure it'll happen. It's perhaps too ambitious to believe we will have a complete consensus. However, I think we can get very close, and we can build together a common way of treating each other that does not trample upon each other. And a big part of that, I think, will be learning how to respectfully disagree, how to be offended and yet not offend in return, how to be brave, how to be strong, how to be, okay, I've said, that sounds terrible to me. That sounds as if you're an evil person, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because I think your intentions are good. I think once we begin talking to each other as if we are evil, we've lost sight of our common humanity. And that leads into our first principle. I will be, in this introduction, I'm going to go through several of the primary principles of the Betterment Project just to give kind of an overview of how this is all going to work. It won't be comprehensive in any way. This is just the introduction, but hopefully it'll start giving you some taste of what the project is going to be like, what kind of thinking has gone into it, how we're grounding it. So the number one overarching important principle of the Betterment Project is humility. And here I mean that we realize that we could be incorrect. We're just human. We're not like gods that know everything and can confirm everything we know. We have hidden biases. We have assumptions we've made that we don't even realize. The Betterment Project, through a methodology, an epistemological methodology called the category system, is intended to help us to map all these different ideas, all these different thoughts we have, and to uncover our assumptions, uncover our commitments, and to enable us to recognize what our paradigm is, what our belief system is, so that we can improve it, make it more structured, and most importantly, so that we can understand how our beliefs can still be held as sacred to us and yet get along with other people. That's the goal. The goal is not to force anybody to believe anything. We've tried that. We've tried it over and over again. We're yelling at each other. We're getting so aggressive with each other. We've lost the ability to be patient, to hear another out. We're only focused on winning. The Betterment Project is intended to be a process by which we can come together around our human commonality and help each other solve each other's problems, help each other make plans that will enable the human race to survive, if you will. A second principle of the Betterment Project is consistency. And by consistency, I mean, how can we see the world in a consistent manner? How can we make sure all our beliefs do not contradict each other, that our ideals way up here mesh well with practically how we want to live our lives? Just to give you an idea of a little more about what I mean by consistency, imagine a brick. You know, bricks are hard. They're usually red, not always, but sometimes. Usually they are heavy. We can build things out of them. Because those properties are consistent, we can use bricks to build things. If those properties were not consistent, it would be pretty hard to do things with them. I mean, if the color changed randomly, well, that would be kind of cool. Maybe not very aesthetic at times. But what if bricks became soft for no causal reason? They just suddenly became soft. Even one soft brick in a wall could start causing problems. Or what if they became liquid without reason? What if they turned to gas? What if they blew up? These are all issues of what it means to be consistent. Now, consistency, of course, also is about how you're thinking. So if you suddenly decide that 2 + 2 is not 4, but 5, you're going to run into some problems in your budgeting. You're going to start overspending, or you're going to start underspending or under-evaluating your financial situation. The same things can be said about any belief, whether it's a religious belief or a philosophical belief, a scientific belief. We have to have consistency. Now, I realize that there are belief systems that try to say that rationality is something like an illusion, or that it is a construct. But the problem with that is they will then turn around and give you a consistent argument for why that is true, which is kind of weird. I won't go into much of that right now. I might do a whole episode on that eventually. But the point is you can discover what they mean in a consistent way. That proves, in my mind at least, that consistency is one of the most important things we know of, and we have to be consistent. We have to have a consistent model of reality, of our lives, of how we interact with each other. Okay, now I'm going to pause for a minute and show how consistency relates together with the commons and how it compares to our typical idea of arguments, confrontation, convincing other people that we're right. Take your belief system from the ideologies up top all the way down to how you're actually living your life on the ground. Now let's zoom that out this way, and let's see all the others that are all around us. Now imagine that there's something that unifies all those. Call that the commons. The commons is everything that you and I can say we all agree with. So we're human. We can speak, we can see. If you can't see, we know that that's not part of who you are. That's because of some unfortunate accident or defect. We reproduce, we think, we imagine. We have a heart, not just the one that beats behind our rib cage, but emotions that drive us and push us towards better ways of achieving what we want. These things are common. These things we have in common. What we usually try to do in discussing things with each other, in arguments, we usually try to negotiate or entrap somebody in a certain way of thinking so that we can force them, if you will, to believe the way we want to. So we will say, you believe this, right? And you believe this, right? And you believe this. Well, if you believe all these, you have to believe that. And the position of the Betterment Project is that that system does not work. So it does not work for at least two reasons. The first reason, hopefully, is obvious. How often do you actually see it work? I mean, how often do you see a debate, an argument, a discussion where somebody tries to cram a conclusion down somebody's throat and the person just dismisses all the beliefs that they've had for most of their life? I mean, it happens every now and then. You know, it's the first time somebody's encountered it, and they're tracking with you, they're gelling, and all of a sudden their eyes open, and they're like, whoa, he's right. But most of the time, when it comes to people's sincerely, deeply heartfelt beliefs, you know, the beliefs that have been handed down for generations or that they have had a personal commitment to because of the way it's impacted and changed their life, they're more resilient than that. Instead of discrediting their own beliefs, they end up discrediting, in their own mind, discrediting you as being right. And so they're like, you know, their wry smile comes up and they're like, yeah, well, but, you know, or maybe they're thoughtful and they're disturbed, they walk away, and then once they walk away, they rebolster their beliefs. It's not efficient. It's, you know, it's efficient, I suppose, if it's the only way to do it if you're just trying to hammer your beliefs home to somebody and make sure, you know, you prove yourself right. I proved myself right because I showed you the argument. But if you're actually trying to connect with people, share your heart, share your paradigm of the world, you have to do more than just attack. You have to have a discussion, which is what the Betterment Project attempts to do. So that's, you know, first reason it doesn't work. It's not efficient for building commonality. Number two is more of a technical reason. You cannot prove with certainty the starting points, the assumptions you start with. You know, when you're starting, you know, you say you believe this, you believe that, you believe this. Those things can sound great, but we don't have the capacity to absolutely prove them. And because we cannot confirm them, what we are doing is not knowing with certainty that these things are true, these beginning assumptions, but we are committing to them. And so we could be committing to a methodology of naturalistic science, or we could be committing to a God of the Old Testament, or a God of the New Testament, or a God of the Quran, or we could be committing to a tradition that our family has passed down to us. We could be committing to any kind of religion, any kind of view of the world. We could be making our own and committing to that. The point is that the beginning assumptions we start with are not things we know with certainty. Rather, the beginning assumptions are commitments or assumptions. We may not even know we made them. The project begins there, begins with humility, begins with recognizing that we're all limited. We all lack certainty. We're all, in a sense, making a step of trust that we have arrived at something that is good and true. And then we build everything else from that. Even if we are making a progressive abstraction from the reality we observe and trying to find what are the most essential things we can find about humanity and our universe, we are still arriving at something that is not certain and confirmable in the sense that we can certainly confirm something scientifically. We are building towards something, and we don't know what mistakes we've made because we don't have the whole picture. All right, so consistency is ensuring that all those steps are as consistent as possible. I'll briefly mention two other principles, complete and accurate. There's a whole can of worms that'll open up if I go into them right now. But the idea behind completeness and accuracy is that in order to know with as much certainty as we can what is true about our reality, my theory is that we have to have completeness and accuracy. That means if we're leaving things out, we're not going to have a good model. And if the things that we have in are inaccurate, we're going to have problems. That's all I'm going to say about that because it gets crazy quick. Okay, so the last principle I'm going to try to briefly touch on today is the idea of systems versus linear, singular causal chains. So we have a tendency to simplify things. It's kind of necessary. It's a very complicated world we live in. If we did not learn to simplify things, we would spend a great deal more time thinking and processing what we were seeing, which would not be a very good survival technique, either in the wild, being chased by tigers and trying to hunt, or in a job situation. So we simplify things, and that can be a good thing, but it can also get us into a lot of trouble when we oversimplify who a person is, who a group is, and then we begin to have conflicts with them. So the idea of a system is something much more complicated. The idea of a system is that, if you will, the entire universe is a system. We are systems within that larger system. We have social systems. We are on a planet that has a cyclical system of the water cycle and minerals being pulled out of the earth by induction and such, and being spread, and there's all kinds of things happening. And we can abstract from all those things, and we get our nice linear singularities. But it is often the case that those linear singularities do not actually have enough complexity to describe reality well. And if we use them the wrong way, we will get into trouble. So the idea of a system, for example, would be something like a car. So if you're up in abstraction land and you're describing things from a physics text, you might be able to describe the way a car moves, but you're not describing the reality of that car. For instance, how does it work? What color is it? May not be important to you in abstract land, but it's important to somebody. Is the car staying between the lines, or is it crashing into other people? These are all more complex situations, specific situations, if you will, not abstract situations. And the idea of thinking systemically is to always be looking for the way things interconnect. Where are their boundaries? Where are the hard ways in which they don't interact, and where are the soft, nodes where they do interact, like the steering wheel or the gear shift. Take another example. Let's say there is a boulder rolling towards you. Now there are, if you will, two things you can do, or two things that might happen to an object that a boulder is running towards. Number one, the boulder smashes into them, and the physical systems of our universe create a puddle of something organic and squishy, or maybe rubble or something like that. But the other thing is, if you happen to be a system of sufficient complexity that you can recognize the stone, recognize it as the boulder, recognize it as something that you don't want smashing into you, say you don't have a death wish, you might, but let's say you don't, you can step out of the way. And with that level of complexity, a lot of things open up. And if we're simplifying things, we could be making people into objects that are just rolled over, instead of people that have values that we should respect. What the Betterment Project does is provide a place, if you will, for us to go deeper, to not simply make assumptions about singular things, but to see how things work together in a systemic way. And that's all I'm going to talk about. I've left a lot of things incomplete here, I'm sure, but I will be making a lot more videos. I've already spent 8 hours on this video, so I'm going to stop it, and I hope you'll enjoy it. And follow me on Facebook, check out my website at thebettermentproject.com. Look for me, follow me, listen to the podcasts, just do all the stuff, comment, discuss, and I hope to see you soon. Bye. How do I talk about systems? This is hard. All right. Where are my notes?